Trilio has been working with Red Hat for years, providing data protection, disaster recovery, migration, and application mobility solutions for applications running in Red Hat's open hybrid cloud platforms. From Red Hat OpenStack to Red Hat virtualization and to Kubernetes containers running on Red Hat OpenShift, Trilio works closely with Red Hat to certify and tightly integrate data protection solutions for customers' data so they can easily meet service level agreements and compliance requirements. This becomes increasingly more important as we see accelerated innovation being made possible by Red Hat OpenShift. As more and more cloud-native applications and microservices are being developed for novel use cases that are really changing the world around us, data protection and recovery needs to be addressed at an unprecedented scale. And since the data service provides the persistence or state of those applications, backup and restore protocols now need to provide additional context to the application resources running in the containers. In collaboration with Red Hat, Trilio not only provides context between applications in Red Hat OpenShift and the data services delivered by OpenShift Data Foundation, but also accelerates app development and test environments, leveraging Trilio backups from a single target location. And whether you're part of a DevOps or an IT ops team, data resiliency plays a very important role in data security. Builders and operators of cloud-native applications must take a proactive approach to ransomware protection and recoverability. Architecting a zero-trust data protection strategy and management framework can no longer be an afterthought, ultimately making sure the accurate data is available to only authorized users. And Trilio and Red Hat help customers ensure that their business-critical information is backed up and secure, while working to create a disaster recovery strategy that meets your service level objectives. With your data resiliency and security in mind, Trilio and Red Hat work together, helping to grow and transform your digital future with solutions that bring the benefits of open innovation to today's industry leaders.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Julio Godinez, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar, Protecting Red Hat OpenShift Apps with Cloud-Native Backup and Recovery, brought to you by Red Hat Marketplace and Trilio. We have a great webinar for you today, but before we get started, I need to go through some housekeeping announcements. Today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any part of the webinar, you will be able to access the recording for on-demand viewing. We will be sending a link to access the webinar on demand, or you can visit devops.com/webinars. We want to hear from you, so please feel free to send in your questions at any time throughout the program by using the Q&A tab. We also encourage discussion by using the chat tab, so let us know your thoughts or just say a quick hello. We have a handout available for you, so go over to your handout section and download it there, and you can view it at your own leisure. We also have a few polling questions during today's event, so we'd appreciate it if you could take a couple of seconds to submit your answers when you see those on your screen. Finally, stick around until the end because we are doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stay tuned to see if you're a winner. And finally, joining me today is Ben Morrison, Solutions Architect, Trilio, and Michael St. John, Senior Principal Manager, Cloud Storage and Data Services, Red Hat. And with that, I'm going to put myself on mute, turn off my camera, and pass the program over to Ben.
Thank you, Julio. So to get started here, we'll go ahead and move forward. So our agenda for today is to talk about a product overview of OCP, OpenShift Container Platform, as well as OpenShift Data Foundation. And then finally, we will move towards my section in the second half of the presentation here today, going over TrilioVault for Kubernetes, some of our benefits and partnership that we have with Red Hat OpenShift. And then from there, we'll do a brief demo to take a look at the product TrilioVault for Kubernetes running on Red Hat OpenShift. And so the two presenters today are myself, Ben Morrison. I'm a solutions architect at Trilio. And then we have Michael as well, who's a senior principal marketing manager for Red Hat hybrid platforms. So before we dive too deeply here, just a little overview of Kubernetes challenges and themes overall. So this is some statistics that were published from a CNCF survey actually earlier at the beginning of this year, talking a bit about the top security challenges that users face with Kubernetes and some of those statistics on stateful applications running on containers. And so especially on that right-hand graphic you see here from that CNCF survey, you can see that a good amount of users of Kubernetes are in fact running applications, stateful applications in Kubernetes. And from what we suspect and what we're seeing from the new CNCF survey that's going to come out next year is that 55% is going to be even higher. We're seeing industry trends of many DevOps teams and in IT teams moving their applications to Kubernetes, OpenShift being one of those main distributions out there that people are going to get all the benefits of OCP. And so this will just set the theme for the talk today on moving those stateful applications to Kubernetes with OCP, and also how to go about backing up and migrating those applications once you have them on your OCP cluster. So from there, I'll turn it over to Michael, and he will cover the Red Hat OpenShift portion here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ben. Yeah, and thanks for having me today. So those of you that might not be too familiar with Kubernetes or containers, I thought I'd just start off with a little overview of what Red Hat OpenShift and OpenShift Data Foundation is. So let me slide forward. When you think of Kubernetes and OpenShift, I think one of the clear differentiators that we see is the ease of use and the access to resources. So, while you can run tens or even hundreds of virtual machines in a particular server environment, you can literally scale to thousands of containers with OpenShift. But this means that it really has to be easy to maintain, easy for users to access the resources. And whether you're deploying traditional applications or creating new cloud-native applications, or even driving business insights or leveraging some intelligent applications, AI, ML functions, etc., all of this has to be done within an environment like OpenShift that allows organizations to really create and deploy new code faster, while at the same time securely connecting development to operations. And since OpenShift really provides a flexible and robust platform across the hybrid cloud, organizations are able to adopt new global delivery models from the edge to the data center to hybrid or even multi-cloud environments. And we do that with one consistent experience, regardless of that underlying platform. And so, what does this mean for your business? Well, OpenShift enables innovation that drives your digital modernization. So from an IT operations perspective, OpenShift operators streamline day one and day two operations, handling installation, the management, updates of the environment. But also it allows you to open up a whole new world of automation possibilities for your data pipeline, for example. And it puts resources instantly in the hands of those who need it. So whether it's developers making them faster, more agile, greatly improving the time to value of a lot of your critical projects, for example. But most of all, it's the platform that drives innovation for new, novel use cases that propels your business forward. It differentiates and even allows you to be the catalyst that drives your industry evolution going forward. So, I just to kind of put it in sense of where OpenShift and OpenShift Container Platform sits, as well as OpenShift Data Foundation, at the core of Red Hat OpenShift is the OpenShift Container Platform. This runs all of the cluster services and the orchestration required by your applications, as well as providing the foundation upon which we build the platform services, application services, developer services, and finally the data services. And this is where OpenShift Data Foundation sits in the overall architecture. And these data services really focus on delivering things like data efficiency, data resiliency, security, governance, and discovery. But to dig down a little bit further and not to go too deep here, think about things like compression and performance, policies, encryption, data immutability, compliance, tagging, searching, federation. This is just to name a few of them. But then working with ecosystem partners like Trilio, we're able to provide the robust data protection and data recovery to applications running in the OpenShift environment. And all of these data services need to be covered and integrated with the platform. And that's what OpenShift Data Foundation delivers, because it is truly 100% integrated and developed for an OpenShift environment. And we have a quick poll here. If you can take a moment and just reply to this. As data is growing exponentially, how are you planning to modernize your digital infrastructure to keep pace? That should be pace, sorry. And I'll just pause a moment here. We'll see how those polls are doing. Okay, so it looks like slightly higher, about 50% of people are building new cloud-native applications that adopt scalable object storage protocols. I think that's really interesting and very important too, because in a recent IDC study where they were talking about the data sphere. Data sphere is, of course, the amount of data that is created every year. But then, a lot of that data is actually ephemeral. It comes and then it's not needed to be retained, so it dissipates. But as you look at the storage sphere, which is actually all of that data that is kept, that is actually growing at a very high CAGR, or annual growth rate, because not quite as high as the data sphere, but still pretty high at around 19%, I believe it was. And the VPs from IDC really doubled down and said, folks should really be looking at what their data management platform would be, and really be looking at object data for taking care of this new digital infrastructure strategy going forward. And so let's move on here, talking a little bit more about OpenShift Data Foundation. I'd like to kind of let you know about some of the key components there. So, OpenShift itself, it's a complete platform that's made of many different integrated components. Think of OpenShift Data Foundation as the same type of environment. It's actually made up of several key technologies. And the first is a technology that works with Kubernetes. It's called Rook, but it's essentially an orchestration technology that is layered into OpenShift that provides that simplified day one and day two operations for the platform. It's integrated in with the OpenShift console and delivers that automated administration and management layer. And then OpenShift Data Foundation has at its core a robust software-defined storage system that provides the persistence for any stateful applications that you're developing in OpenShift. So it provides file, block, and object storage classes, which is very important because, depending on whether you need, say, a shared file system for your applications, a lot of applications were written for file, or you're running structured data workloads like databases that need a high performance block-based data backend, or you need massively scalable object storage for cloud applications, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning. OpenShift Data Foundation provides all of these protocols natively within the one data service platform. And then to support the more consistent experience across the hybrid and multi-cloud deployments, OpenShift Data Foundation also includes a technology that provides multi-cloud object gateway. And this supports things like data mirroring and spreading and tiering, object bucket claims, as well as data federation with access to namespace buckets. So no matter where the client resides, on-premise, in private or public clouds, it has access to that data. And why is this all so very important for your applications running in OpenShift? Well, it's because, first of all, it provides a very simplified access to the data. And this is not just from an operations perspective by simplifying the deployment, the automation, management of the data platform, but also because it puts all of your data resources in the hands of the user. So whether that's a developer or an analyst, data scientist, or even an automated process enabled by eventing through things like bucket notifications and streaming out to services like Kafka and serverless functions provided by Knative within Kubernetes. It can do all of that automatically and scale up and actually even scale down to zero. Another huge benefit that it delivers is this consistent experience regardless of the underlying infrastructure. So it supports the data workflow from edge to core out to the cloud, all with the same OpenShift management console and all with the same user experience, regardless of where the data resides. And due to the robust architecture of the solution, OpenShift Data Foundation really delivers that massive scalability. And more importantly, it provides deterministic performance at scale. And this has been demonstrated time and time again in actual deployments, of course, but by partners and by independent analysts as well. We can share more information with you if you'd like to see some of those studies. But OpenShift Data Foundation really just makes the data accessible to applications running across that multi-cloud environment. It drives new insights and unlocks the potential of emerging technologies and modernizes the way that organizations are working today. And in the end, we enable innovation without limitation. But to kind of give you a little bit more sense of how organizations are actually using OpenShift Data Foundation, we look closely at data engineering patterns in respect to workloads. And we've identified 3 data trends: data at rest. This is like stored data in repositories, databases, or file systems, object data. Data in motion, that's the data that's moving or transitioning across applications or infrastructure, triggering events like I mentioned, or being transformed or consumed by other services and applications. And then data in action, where the data is actually being worked on or processed for things like business insights or model training, alerts, notifications, things like that. And so, it's important to understand how our platform works with data in these various states from a resiliency perspective, scalability, and of course, performance. But it isn't I don't think it's sufficient to just run a workload and check a box that says, yes, this is validated. The way that we do things is we undertake these projects that test real world scenarios, and even attempt to break some of the things that we're testing and create what-if scenarios so that we learn best practices as well as where OpenShift Data Foundation is best suited, the green zones, And also where we need to focus our efforts in the product roadmap so that we make it better for future iterations of the product. Now, there's several architectural detail papers that focus on these different workloads, but OpenShift Data Foundation also provides a robust layer or data layer for all of the infrastructure services needs for OpenShift. So if you think about within OpenShift, you need things like monitoring and metrics and logging and registry, all of these infrastructure services. Like, for example, registry for, with Quay, that requires a multi-protocol storage class or storage classes for different parts of that registry service. And OpenShift Data Foundation delivers that data service layer for the entire OpenShift cluster in addition to all of these application workloads. And then we also build services within OpenShift to enable a robust data protection and data recovery strategy. And with the help of Trilio, we can deliver end-to-end backup and recovery services. And we're also working with customers on regional disaster recovery solutions, as well as metro clusters that drive down recovery point objectives and recovery time objectives to close to zero. And this really is very important when you have enterprise services that you're delivering through this platform so that you can, enable the most robust uptime service levels for those critical applications that you have running in your environment. Now, data resiliency is built in with OpenShift Data Foundation, from hash algorithms to data replication or erasure coding at the core to also the shared data persistence across failure zones so that you have application availability in a cloud native context. But as more enterprise grade applications are deployed in containers, organizations also need to do a proper backup and disaster recovery of that environment. So this is why I guess why is it that you can't just leverage an existing backup and recovery model for those applications in Kubernetes? You already have something in place. Well, in containers, this becomes a little bit more complicated than in your traditional type of environments. So you can see here on the left, in a traditional server model, an application and its state are running in a server or a virtual machine environment maybe, and the storage supporting that application is running alongside it. And so when you back up the server image, you back up the storage. If you lose your server, you recover the server image that has the application and its state, and you connect back to the storage. If you lose the storage, you recover from the backup, remount, your application resumes. But in a container environment, it's a little bit different. Your applications are ephemeral. So all of those pods that you're creating are ephemeral. So they go away if something were to happen to that cluster. Persistence is actually kept at the data layer for stateful applications. And if you back up your data, you lose the state and your application's not able to resume when you recover. So with TrilioVault, what you're able to do is actually back up not only your persistent volume data from OpenShift Data Foundation, but also your internal images, complete with cluster-aware metadata, so that your OpenShift cluster resources have context with the data. So when you do that recovery, you get a full recovery, and your applications understand what state they're in by connecting back up to that data platform. So OpenShift Data Foundation creates a snapshot of the data volumes, and then TrilioVault calls APIs to grab cluster resources and internal images to create a complete backup that can then be restored once that cluster comes back online, or even to a separate cluster. We have some demos on that. And with that, I have another poll for you. And this one is, what hybrid cloud strategies are you currently adopting or planning to adopt in the next year? And you can choose multiple of them if you would like. I'll just pause for a moment while people answer. Okay, we've got a few private clouds, a single public cloud vendor, and a few multi-cloud public vendors. I think about 50% or so look like they are deploying private cloud. We do have one who's looking at edge computing too. Very interesting. It's a real big push for us at Red Hat to help customers with their edge computing deployments and that infrastructure. So great, thanks so much for the poll questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Ben to take us through a little trip around TrilioVault for Kubernetes and show us a bit of a demo as well. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. So as Michael said, I'm now going to be covering more in depth TrilioVault for Kubernetes. And so as Michael already started to allude to, as we're seeing right now in this migration, this movement of traditional data protection over to those containerized cloud native applications, we're seeing that those traditional methods of protecting data on those VMs or protecting those monolithic applications do not transfer over to those cloud native applications. So for TrilioVault for Kubernetes, we have three products. Our first two that we started recently with Red Hat as well on OpenStack and Rev. But when Kubernetes came along, we of course wanted to adjust our methodology to Kubernetes and Red Hat OpenShift. And so we designed our backup recovery solution to be focused on those modular microservices, be focused on being very highly scalable and highly automated, and then of course policy driven and tenant driven, so you can have that multi-tenancy. Here are the 6 main categories of TrilioVault for Kubernetes, at least how we'll be covering them today. And so if you see in the top left here, application-centric, first and foremost, TrilioVault for Kubernetes is an application-centric backup recovery and migration solution. You can back up an entire cluster if you wish, but we do not recommend it because Kubernetes clusters, as anyone here I'm sure would know, are very easy to tear down and spin back up. OCP clusters are very easy to tear down and spin back up if there's some sort of underlying infrastructure issue. And so what that really means is what you want to make sure you're protecting is your actual application and its data, or the workloads that you have on that cluster and the persistent volume sitting there. So with TVK, you can select your application or workload based on Helm chart, operator, label, or an entire namespace. And once you select your application, then what Trilio does is it backs up the data and metadata of that application. So all of the Kubernetes objects associated with that workload or application. We are native to Kubernetes. So when you download us specifically through Red Hat, through OCP Operator Hub, we're packaged as an operator and we deploy custom resource definitions directly into the Kubernetes API. So this means you can use commands like OC get backups, OC get restores to interact with TVK. Same thing with kubectl get backups, kubectl get restores. And not only is this convenient on the CLI, but also this means you have a lot easier integration of TVK to other third-party tools, which brings us to that enterprise class and ecosystem toolings point just below. So we have hooks, restores, and transforms, just a few features that essentially help with ensuring that Trilio is that enterprise class solution you need and helping you with moving applications from one cluster to another. But also because we're directly integrated with that Kubernetes API, we're very compatible with third-party tools out there like Prometheus, Grafana, FluentD. Essentially anything that interacts directly with Kubernetes API, you can then integrate and use with TVK if you wish. As far as infrastructure compatibility and certifications, we do require a CSI driver with snapshotting functionality. But of course, as Michael mentioned, the OpenShift Data Foundation already has that snapshotting capability, so you're good to go there. And we also do require an NFS or S3 compatible target to store your backups onto. And so that's provided on the user end. That's not provided on Trilio's end, but we have that storage agnostic capability. So as long as it's S3 compatible or NFS, you will be able to use it with Trilio to back up those backups, or to store those backups, excuse me. And then one more point here in terms of certifications. We have a variety of certifications out there with some different distributions, but Red Hat our Red Hat operator certification was our first certification and actually our most robust certification. We're managed by the OLM, the Operator Lifecycle Manager in OCP. And so this helps you with automatic updates and just maintaining operator health overall. And we have a lot of other benefits that we also have included in there with Red Hat and OCP that we'll cover later. And then just one more point on the certifications too. We are compatible with any CNCF certified distribution. So just because it's not listed here doesn't mean we're not compatible with it. So if you use any other distribution, or if you're using upstream Kubernetes and you want to move your workloads to OCP, you can also use Trilio to do that. We have a management console, a UI that allows you to do all the functionality and capabilities of using the CLI with Kubernetes only in that click-driven workflow. And plus, additionally, you get some extra benefits in there, such as application discovery and backup and restore monitoring, which we'll talk a bit about. And then lastly here, we're very easy to try and install. You can do a 30-day free trial with us. You can do a free basic edition, which is for a cluster that's up to 10 nodes or 20 CPUs. And then, of course, beyond that, you have the enterprise edition licensing that gives you that premium support 24/7, 365. So just to paint the picture one more time of what exactly TrilioVault for Kubernetes does, if you have a Kubernetes cluster 1 here and all of your applications running on that cluster, all of the pods, PVs, secrets, etc., Trilio can capture all of those, back them up to the NFS or S3 target, and then restore them back into that same cluster, whether it be OCP or upstream Kubernetes or whatever, or you can restore it into a secondary OCP or Kubernetes cluster. So it looks like we have another poll here, just asking the audience, do you run stateful applications within Kubernetes? A few different options there. You can do it in production. Yes, you're evaluating. You plan to do so in the next 6 months, or no, you are only doing stateless and only plan on doing stateless in the near future. So we'll give some time for those polls to come in. Looks like we still got some coming in here. Okay, looks like only 6 responses, but looks like I think we are good on this one, so we can go ahead and close that poll. So it looks like we have 33% saying that they run stateful applications in Kubernetes, which is great to hear. We had never roll in. That's great. And so yes, for B, we had 43% say that you are evaluating doing stateful applications in Kubernetes. That's great to see you're already on that journey. And then 14% plan to do so in the next 6 months, and 14% are sticking with stateless. So thinking back to those metrics we saw at the beginning of the webinar, right? So if we saw before that 55% are running stateful applications in Kubernetes. And it looks like here, just by looking at this, we have over 55 now are in production or at least evaluating stateful applications in Kubernetes. So we can see that industry trend is continuing to move towards those stateful applications in Kubernetes, or in OCP specifically. So packaging and accessibility of TrilioVault for Kubernetes, you can download us using Helm charts, our upstream operator, and this is with Helm v2 or v3. You can access that Helm repository through our GitHub and through our documentation. But if you're running OCP, which I hope you are, hope you plan to if you're here in this webinar, you can actually go into the operator hub in Red Hat OCP and download Trilio directly from there. And we'll show a little bit of that in the demo later, just where to go about that download. And like I said before, our operator in the operator hub is actually managed by that operator lifecycle manager. So you get the perks of automatic updates and operator management as well. So here are a little bit more details on the integration between TrilioVault and Red Hat, getting a little bit more into the weeds here. As I said before, deployment on Operator Hub, fully managed by that Operator Lifecycle Manager. And you can even manage those YAML files and workflows directly through OCP as well. And then on top of that, you have out-of-the-box integration with a CSI driver, OpenShift Data Foundation, that has that snapshotting functionality. So you don't even have to worry about getting your own CSI driver that has snapshotting functionality. You'll already have that integration. And then beyond that, There's no additional configuration that's really required for setting up through OCP. There's a few, actually with our newest update, it automatically sets up the UI. Previously, you had to take a few extra steps, but OCP now automatically updates and creates the TVK UI, so you can access that immediately. And the only other requirement there would be the CSI driver. You have to ensure that it is set to default. That's the default CSI driver with snapshotting functionality in your OCP cluster. But besides that, it's a quick edit and change of the CSI driver itself. There's no extra install you have to do. So very, very out-of-the-box integration when you're using Trilio and Red Hat together. Now, some more detail on the TVK architecture itself. First, we have a control plane, just the back end that manages all those custom resource definitions, the web UI, the scheduling, etc. Next, you have the metadata plane, which actually is where Trilio captures the metadata of your application. So that's the deployments, secrets, config maps, services, etc. Even if it's not listed here, as long as it's a piece of metadata and an object in Kubernetes and is properly labeled or associated with a Helm charter operator, Trilio will capture it. Trilio will capture it to include it within your workload and application. And it does that using a meta mover pod and stores it onto that NFS or S3 target in JSON format. Then lastly, we have the data plane, which is where TVK captures the actual data sitting in those persistent volumes for your stateful applications, does so with a data mover pod and stores it onto the NFS or S3 target. And two important notes I want to make here. One is through TVK, you can do something called incremental backups or calculating incremental changes. And this essentially only backs up the changes in data that have occurred from your current backup to your previous backup. So if you're doing a backup every single day, it'll say on day 2, what's the difference in data between day 1 and day 2, and I'm only going to back up that data. And there's a variety of reasons why we do this. It reduces the need for any deduplication. It minimizes the storage that you have that you're using on your target, so it saves you costs in that way. It means that the backup process is quicker because you have less throughput going over the network when you do that backup itself. So a variety of benefits you see from this incremental backup. And then secondly, those backups are stored in QCOW2 format. And the reason why QCOW2 is significant is because it is a Linux industry standard. So it's a non-proprietary file format. We don't lead to any lock-in. By using TVK, you'll obviously be creating and restoring these QCOW2 files with Trilio. But if you want to use another tool, maybe a malware scanner or some other third-party tool to interact with those QCOW2 files, you can do so, and you'll have access to them. Whereas some other solutions out there do have proprietary file formats, and so you can't use other tools with those backup files. Quick touch on our custom resource definitions here. So these are all the custom resource definitions, or at least the major ones that TVK deploys into that Kubernetes API. You have your target, which is that NFS or S3 bucket where those backups are stored. Your policies, which decides the frequency of your backups. You can do backups every day, every hour, every week, whatever you wish. Down to the minute. You can do backups down to the minute if you wish. And it also lets you outline that backup retention policy. So how many backups you want to keep on a given month or a given year or a given week. You could say only keep 3 backups a month. And then at the end of every month, Trilio goes and cleans up all the other backups and just keeps your 3 most recent. We also have hooks, pre and post triggers, which can be used for a variety of purposes because they're simply commands executed before and after a backup occurs. So very useful for having that application consistency, integrating Trilio with your existing systems. However, it's most commonly used for quiescing databases. And we do have examples of those hooks in our documentation as well for a lot of major databases out there. Backup plan is where target policy and hook fall under. This is also how you select how you want to go about backing up your application, whether it's a Helm, label, operator, or an entire namespace. You then have the backup operational CRD, choosing either a full or incremental backup. Then you can do a restore CRD, which is selecting your backup, choosing what cluster to restore it into, and then choosing the namespace to restore it into. And then lastly, of course, you have your application running on Kubernetes. So here's some detail on labels, Helm, operator, and namespace, how you can go about backing up an application. First and foremost, you can choose an entire namespace, and just as it sounds, you back up every resource within that given namespace, all applications and all objects. With labels, if you select a certain label, what Trilio does is it finds all the Kubernetes objects associated with that label and backs them all up together. You can do multiple labels at once, or you can just do one label. It's completely up to you. With Helm charts, very similar. Trilio finds all the metadata and data, all of those objects, persistent volumes, and all the metadata, and backs them up. However, with Helm chart, Trilio also backs up all revisions of the Helm chart itself. And then when it's restored, it deploys that most recently deployed revision of your Helm chart. So you're getting some extra benefit there in actually backing up the Helm charts themselves. And then with operators, you can back up based on operator. And again, selects all the resources associated with the application. However, it also backs up those operator custom resources. So again, when you restore your application, it also restores that operator. So it will be up and running. And maybe if it has automatic updates through that operator, that will all be functional and operating when you do that restore itself. So we have another poll here. What do you use to manage applications within Kubernetes? Are you a team that mostly uses Helm chart? Do you use operators to deploy those applications? Are you strictly using namespace level focus? Would you back up based on namespaces? Or are you just using labels? That simple, the essential of Kubernetes is those labels, of course. So we'll wait for a second here to get those responses in. Okay, looks like we're spread all across the board. Even split between Helm, operator, namespaces, and labels, which I kind of would expect actually, because it sounds like as an essay. Oh, we just got one more on Helm there. So 40% on Helm, the rest are all 20%. And so I'm not surprised. It sounds like usually when I talk to DevOps teams, they are using Helm charts to deploy their applications. Operator, a little bit less so, but there's still some out there. And then namespaces and labels make sense that anyone would organize their workloads based on namespace and label if they're not using Helm charts. And actually, as I'm talking right here, we're getting even more responses in for Helm chart, it looks like. So now we're actually up to 63% on Helm charts, and then even across operator, namespaces, and labels. I will keep moving along here to try to save time for that demo. I hope I can do that demo still for you guys. So real quick, a bit about the design platform of Trilio. Trilio does not require admin access. You can do based on any roles and permissions you wish. Trilio utilizes those existing security context constraints, so it does not create any new SCCs, which just helps you with, again, maintain those contexts. Service accounts, Trilio creates its own service accounts and does not leverage default service accounts, and so those can be created during runtime or deleted during runtime. Permissions and capabilities, you can actually align your permissions and capabilities with existing roles and permissions, such as with OCP. You could align them for OCP to have those same permissions and capabilities with your roles. And then lastly, security product definitions are outlined within the documentation itself, especially when it comes to ransomware. We've done a lot more to improve our security, and not that it was bad before, but going above and beyond. Really, we're really going above and beyond with ensuring some security against ransomware and other pieces and malware and everything. So that can all be found in our documentation. A little bit on the management console here. We have something called application discovery, which is all of these honeycomb features in the middle here, which essentially allows you to see all of those applications and namespaces and see which ones are protected and which ones are not. You have very intuitive real-time management. You can use simple workflows to manage all of your backups and restores, again, giving you all those capabilities of Kubernetes, but the simplicity of a UI management console. You can migrate applications across different clusters. which is very exciting. You can use multi-cluster management, and you can also monitor the overall health of your backups and restores themselves. As well as lastly there, if you were a previous user of Velero, you can integrate Velero directly into this management console. So as you transition to Trilio, it'll make for a smooth and easy transition because you can still see those backups and restores done through Velero. And so our last slide here, we have just all of our compatibility. On the left-hand side, any CNCF certified distribution. We also have the CSI driver with snapshotting functionality. We have our targets, that S3 compatible or NFS. We went over a little bit of ecosystem tooling. Grafana, Prometheus, and actually FluentD also are the 3 most common ones people use with us. However, any third-party tool out there that interacts directly with the Kubernetes API, you can use with TVK. Here's a list of databases that we actually use, that we have documentation on for using backup plans or hooks specifically with any of these databases. We are compatible with all the major databases out there, so this is not a comprehensive list of our compatibility. This is just an example of the databases we do currently have documentation on. And then lastly, we're compatible on any cloud out there, public or on-prem. And so at this point, I'm going to move over to a quick demo here, trying to show. Yep, so I'm seeing we only have about 10 minutes left here. And so I'm not going to forcefully have time to do an entire demo, but I do want to just do some quick highlights on how you can get started with downloading TrilioVault for Kubernetes. So here, if everyone can see my screen, if not, I'm sure one of the presenters will speak up and let me know if you cannot see my screen. But I just want to show in here, I'm on, I have 2 OCP clusters here. One of them, this is SA OCP running on GCP 4 is the name of the cluster here. So OCP cluster running on Google Cloud Platform here. And so when I come in here and I look at my operators, I can go directly into the operator hub. And from here, I can go and select a certified operator to make sure I'm looking at all certified operators. Go ahead and search Trilio, and here we have it hopping up in the operator hub. I can see the latest version that's available. Of course, it's already installed on this cluster, which is why it says uninstall, but otherwise it would say install here. And from here, you can see the capability level that we have with Red Hat OCP. Not only do we have the basic install, which is the first step in that certification, but we also have seamless upgrades and full lifecycle management with that operator lifecycle manager. So just showing you that those extra benefits you get with Trilio on OCP. Now, if I go into the installed operators here, I can see all the normal tabs that I would have for any operator. I can look at the YAML files, the subscription, the events of my operator itself. But as I go further along, I can actually see that I can look at the targets that are configured with my TVK instance, or the policies, these CRDs that I mentioned before. I can see these policies, these hooks, these backup plans directly in the OCP UI. So you can actually manage your backups and restores through Trilio directly through the OCP UI. I could even create new backup plans if I wanted to and kick off backups all right through here. So now that we took a look at this, we won't have time for that full backup and restore, unfortunately, but I can point you in the directions of some videos we have online. But here you can now see the TVK UI here. So first thing I'm going to do is quickly log out just to show you the login process. I can log in to TrilioVault for Kubernetes with a kubeconfig file if I wish. I can configure a variety of single sign-in options, such as GitHub. Google would be another one for Google accounts. I can do an LDAP, or I can log in directly through OpenShift right here. And so since I'm already logged into that cluster itself, OCP recognizes those credentials and automatically signs me into TrilioVault for Kubernetes. Now here, the first thing I'm looking at is that application discovery here. So these are all of my namespaces. And if I go along here, I can see this WordPress namespace right here, which was successfully backed up and restored. I can then see a bit of the status log and details on this backup itself, see the meta snapshot, that occurred, the data snapshot that occurred, that data upload, and then the metadata upload. Whole process taking only about 3 minutes here. And then if I wanted to go about seeing the metadata, here's all the exact metadata that I backed up. So I can get very granular here. And I can even do a restore right here into a different namespace in my same cluster if I wish. But for now, for the sake of time here, I'm going to move over to the disaster recovery tab. And so here, if I wanted to do a disaster recovery plan, I could, for example, take a backup that I have in my primary cluster and restore it into this secondary SA OCP GCP 5 cluster. If you remember, the first cluster we had was 4. This one is 5. And so here, to make that disaster recovery plan, I can just name my plan itself. I select the target where all those backups are stored into. And now here you're going to see a variety of dropdowns. These are actually different clusters here. And so these are all different backups on different clusters that are all stored in this target itself. And because of my roles and permissions, I can see all of these backups. So if I wanted to, theoretically, I could restore a backup that I took in an RKE cluster into this current cluster, or a GKE cluster. But for here, for example, I'm going to select this WordPress namespace backup plan that was backed up on a different OCP cluster. From here, I can select the namespace I want to restore into. If I want, I can select some transforms. If I wanted to, for example, change my storage class, I could do so here. I could also exclude certain resources to get much more granular, or add in different hooks if I wish. And so for now, I'm going to go ahead and kick off this restore process itself, but I will have to switch back over to the slides for the sake of time. And if this restore completes, we'll get to take a look at it. But if not, you'll at least see how to kick off that restore process. Okay, now I'm going to pull my slides back up. So some of those use cases: backup and recovery, disaster recovery, governance and compliance, ransomware and protection, and recoverability and migration, all different use cases that you can use Trilio for. Obviously, backup recovery and disaster recovery are the two most common, but as I mentioned, we've really had grown much more robust ransomware features and protection capabilities. So if you would like more information on that, please reach out to myself or anyone on the Trilio team, and we'd be happy to give you more information. Benefits with OCP and TVK. We've already talked a bit about this, but as you saw, you can manage both TVK and OCP all through the OCP dashboard through that one pane of glass. You have auto configuration of your routes themselves. So that was that TVK UI I mentioned. Now with our newest release, OCP automatically creates that configuration, and you automatically have your TrilioVault for Kubernetes user interface accessible and configured. That authentication, you can log in all through OCP with Trilio if you wish. You have that certified operator, and you also have out-of-the-box support for, I think that's supposed to be OpenShift Data Foundation for that CSI driver with snapshotting functionality. So really, if you have a OCP and you want to install Trilio, you're going to be ready to go very, very quickly. Normally, Trilio takes about an hour to download and configure, but if you're using OCP, you're going to significantly cut down on that time, and you can already get started with playing around with Trilio and seeing if it's the right product for you. And so one last slide here. This is just more information on links that can show you more solution briefs and white papers and deployment guides on TrilioVault for Kubernetes on OpenShift itself, talking more about our benefit, our partnership together and the benefits you get out of both of these companies working together. So you'll have access to these slides, I believe, after the webinar themselves, and you'll have access to these links. And with that, I want to say thank you. We can now, I think, just have a few minutes left. Michael, if you want to hop on here, and I think we can cover a few questions that we have listed in the chat. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to drop them now.
Absolutely. If you have any questions, you can submit them in the Q&A section. We do have a few questions. So first one, what install scopes does TrilioVault support?
Sure, absolutely. So you can install Trilio based on using a Helm chart, Helm v3, and you can install based on just a namespace itself, or you can install at the cluster level. So getting back to that, no need for admin access. If you're not an administrator, you don't have access to the entire cluster, but you do individually want to use Trilio, you can install at that namespace level as well.
Excellent. Next question here. How does data protection help me with data security?
Yeah. So, I think, overall, one of the things that we might look at is how, as you're looking at data security from a, overall perspective, there's a triad, a CIA triad, they call it, essentially looking at confidentiality. That's, just your ability to set up policies that govern the access to the data. Integrity, which is the data accuracy, making sure that your data is not corrupted or compromised. And then availability, which is the A portion of that triad. And that's really making sure that authorized users have access to the data when they need it. And so I think, really as we look at that overall data security pattern, Red Hat covers a lot of that confidentiality, integrity piece of that, but the availability is really something where Trilio shines, and they have the backup, the restore, the disaster recovery capabilities. And I don't know, Ben, if you want to talk a little bit more about some of the ransomware attacks and how you defend against things like that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Michael. So Trilio, on our end, we are not protecting against a ransomware attack occurring. Just to clarify, we're not a cybersecurity solution in that way. What we do is we offer protected backups themselves. So in the event that your cybersecurity fails, and in the event that a malicious actor actually gets into your system and encrypts some of that data or alters your system or your application in some way, Trilio you can then use to restore your application exactly as it was in the point in time that you last took a backup and that it was safe. And you restore it into a different application, have access to that data immediately and not have to pay that ransom. And we ensure that you have a protected backup itself, because we offer double encryption and double immutability on those backups themselves. We offer some solutions such as malware scanning, detecting for abnormal events, lockdown of roles and permissions. So if a malicious actor gets in one user's roles and permissions, you can lock down those roles and permissions. So there's really a variety of steps we've taken, and we've aligned all of those features to the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is an internationally recognized framework for protecting against ransomware attacks and best practices. So we're a reactionary method of protecting against ransomware. If it were ever to happen, if that event were ever to happen, we do not protect on the outside, but we are there to offer that backup to be restored if an attack were to occur.
Excellent. Unfortunately, it looks like we're right at the top of the hour. So I do want to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the webinar, you will be able to watch it again. We will be sending an email with the link to access the webinar on demand. And you can also find it on devops.com. Just look in the on-demand section in the webinars page, and it should be there. I did mention at the beginning that we were doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So our first winner is Ryan K. Congratulations, Ryan. Our second winner is Vincenzo I. Our third winner is Lisa G. And our final winner is Gustavo D. So congratulations to all our winners. We'll be reaching out to you via email with instructions for claiming your Amazon gift card. So please check your inbox. And if you don't see it there, check your spam folder. Ben and Michael, thanks again for putting together this comprehensive presentation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And finally, we'd also like to thank their audience for their time and engagement. This is Julio Godinez signing off until next time. Be well, everyone.